Everyone, welcome back to another week of AP Microeconomics. Last week we covered demand, so this week we will cover supply. By the end of this lesson, you will be able to explain supply and the law of supply, identify and explain a supply curve, create and interpret a supply curve using a data set. Now, what is supply? Supply is the amount of some good or service a producer is willing to supply at each price. Price is what the producer receives for selling one unit of a good or a service. When price rises, it will lead to an increase in quantity of that good and service. When price decreases, it leads to a decrease in quantity supplied. So back to our gasoline example that we went over in our first lecture, we think of it this way. Price of gasoline rises. It encourages profit-seeking firms to take several actions: expand exploration for all oil reserves, drill for more oil, invest in more pipelines and oil tankers to bring the oil to plants where it can be refined into gasoline, build new oil refineries, purchase additional pipelines and trucks to ship the gasoline to gas stations and open more gas stations, or keep existing gas stations open longer hours. Now, the law of supply is a higher price leads to a higher quantity supplied, and a lower price leads to a lower quantity supplied. The law of supply, like the law of demand, assumes that all other variables that affect supply are held equal, as learned in our first lecture, the ceteris paribus, all things equal. Now the question is supply the same as quantity supplied? Now, in economic terminology, supply is not the same as quantity demanded. When economies refer to supply, they mean the relationship between a range of prices and the quantity supplied at those prices. A relationship that can be illustrated with a supply curve or supply schedule. When economists refer to quantity supplied, they mean only a certain point on the supply curve or one quantity on the supply curve. In short, supply refers to the curve and quantity supplied refers to the specific point on the curve. So the supply schedule is a table that we've kind of gone over the past couple of weeks. And this is a supply schedule. A supply schedule is a table that shows the quantity supplied at a range of different prices. So as you can see, price, so say for instance, for a gallon of gasoline is $1.40. The quantity supplied in millions of gallons would be 600. Now, supply curve. A supply curve is a graphic illustration of a relationship between price, shown on the vertical axis, and quantity, shown on the horizontal axis. So I do have a example of what a supply curve looks like. Now, as you can see from this curve, that as the price rises, quantity supplied also increases, and vice versa. The supply schedule and the supply curve are just two different ways of showing the same information. Note that each point on the supply curve comes from one row in Table 1, as I showed previously. For example, the lowermost point on the supply curve corresponds to the first row in Table 1, while the uppermost point corresponds to the last row. Notice also that the horizontal and vertical axes on the graph for the supply curve are the same as the demand curve. The shape of supply curves will vary somewhat according to the product product. So steeper, flatter, straighter, or curved, based on when you connect those dots and create a line as you see here. Nearly all supply curves, however, share a basic similarity. They slope up from left to right and illustrate the law of supply. As the supply rises, say from $1 per gallon to $2.20 per gallon, the quantity supplied increases from 500 gallons to 720 gallons. Conversely, as the price falls, the quantity supplied decreases. Now, we're going to go over the factors affecting supply. So the first one will be production costs. So a shift in supply means a change in the quantity supplied at every price. Changes if the cost of inputs, natural disasters, new technologies, taxes, subsidies, and government regulations all affect the cost of production. Input costs or factors of production are the costs associated with producing the good. Output is goods and services. The more that you produce, the more you will earn. A change in price of a good or service typically causes a change in quantity supplied or movement along the supply curve. So what motivates firms? Profits, of course. Profits is the difference between revenues and costs. Goods and services are produced using combinations of labor, materials, and machinery. If a firm faces lower costs of production while the prices of a good or service the firm produces remains unchanged, a firm profits go up. So, for example, say a messenger company that delivers packages around a city. The company may find that buying gasoline in one of its main costs. If the price of gasoline falls, then the company may find it can deliver packages more cheaply than before. Since lower costs correspond to higher profits, the messenger company may now supply more of its services at any given price. For example, given the lower gasoline prices, the company can now serve a greater area and increase its supply. Now, conversely, if a firm faces higher costs of production, then it can earn lower profits at any given selling price of its products. As a result, a higher cost of production typically causes a firm to supply a smaller quantity at any given price. In this case, the supply curve shifts to the left. Now we're going to use a different example. So another example will be cars. So obviously cars use gasoline. So we're going to go in this direction here in regards to cars. So consider the supply for cars shown by figure S0 in the figure 1 to the left. Point J indicates that if the price is $20,000, the quantity supplied will be 18 million cars. If the price rises to $22,000 per car, as according to ceteris paribus, the quantity supplied will rise to 20 million cars. As point K on the S0 curve shows. The same information can be shown in table form as it is to the right of your screen, of the slide. Now, let's just imagine that the price of steel, an important component of vehicle manufacturing, rises, so that producing a car may become more expensive at any given price for selling cars. Car manufacturers may react by supplying a lower quantity. This can be shown graphically as a leftward shift of supply from S0 to S1, which indicates that at any given price, the price supply decreases. In this example, at a price of $20,000, the quantity supply decreases from $18 million. on the original supply curve, which is S0, to 16.5 million on the supply curve in S1, which is labeled at point L. So you can see that shift with the little black arrows in between each curve. It's shifting to the left. And conversely, if the price of steel decreases, producing a car becomes less expensive. At any given price for selling cars, car manufacturers can now expect to earn higher profits, so they will supply a higher quantity. The shift of supply to the right from S0 to S2 means that at all prices, the quantity supplied has increased. In this example, at a price of $20,000, the quantity supplied increases from 18 million to the original supply curve S0 to 19.8 million on the supply curve S2, which is labeled M. Now, I just went over one of the factors. So there are some other factors that do affect the supply. They include changes in weather or other natural conditions, new technology for production, government policy. So when a government subsidy is when the government pays a firm directly or reduces the firm's taxes if the firm carries out certain actions. So sometimes this can be looked at as like a government contract. So, some car companies like Ford or Chevy or, the big three, they may manufacture like military vehicles, and they can be under a government contract where they're supposed to produce so many a month or so many a quarter to meet the needs of our military. So the cost of production for many agricultural products will be affected in changes in natural conditions. For example, the area of northern China that typically grows about 60% of the country's wheat output experienced its worst drought in at least 50 years in the second half of 2009. A drought decreases the supply of agricultural products, which means that at any given price, a lower quantity will be supplied. Conversely, especially good weather would shift the supply curve to the right. When a firm discovers that a new technology that allows it to produce at a lower cost, the supply curve will shift to the right as well. For instance, in the 1960s, a major scientific effort nicknamed the Green Revolution focused on breeding improved seeds for basic crops like wheat and rice. By the early 1990s, more than 2/3 of the wheat and rice in lower-income countries around the world had grown with these Green Revolution seeds, and the harvest was twice as high as per acre. A technological improvement that reduces cost or production will shift supply to the right so that a greater quantity will be produced at any given price. Government policies can affect the cost of production and the supply curve through taxes, regulations, and subsidies, as I stated earlier. Like I said, another example will be the U.S. government imposing a tax on alcoholic beverages that collects about $18 billion per year from producers. Taxes are treated as costs by businesses. Higher costs decrease supply for the reasons discussed above. Other examples of policy that can affect costs are the wide array of government regulations that require firms to spend money to provide a cleaner environment or a safer workplace. Complying with regulations increases costs. From the firm's perspective, taxes or regulations are an additional cost of production that shifts supply to the left, leading the firm to produce a lower quantity at every given price. Government subsidies reduce the cost of production and increase supply at every given price, shifting supply to the right. Now, this concludes our the lesson on supply. Our next lesson will focus on how supply and demand work together through equilibrium. At the end of this lesson, you can actually take a look at this
Let's start by talking about some of
this clip here that started playing on how supply and demand work together through equilibrium. You can take a look at this video so you are prepared for next week, as we will cover equilibrium. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week, and we'll be talking about equilibrium next week. Have a great one. Bye.